Cheers, everyone. Thank you for joining me. I am Dave Brown, and this is the New Populist. If you are new to my channel, please like and subscribe. So we are in month 8 or 9 of this Ukraine-Russia conflict, and it does not seem to be slowing down. The money's still flowing in. We've had a change of prime minister in England, and he reaffirmed England's commitment to the war, the UK. And even this new prime minister in Italy, who I thought would be a little less cavalier toward this war, is saying the same thing about the war that the previous prime minister was saying, which is that they need to hold Putin accountable and keep assisting the Ukrainians in this war. And so even with a change of leadership in Europe in a few places, the attitude toward Russia, toward Ukraine, has not changed. And given the situation, I thought it would be a good idea to talk about the Marxist viewpoint on war. Now, I'm not a Marxist. I'm a conservative, libertarian, populist, somewhere around there, right of center. I believe in free markets and representative government, democracy generally. But I think it's useful to look back and understand the Marxist viewpoint on war, because when you do that, they actually make a few good points. And we, here in the 21st century, Republicans, conservatives, we could learn something from why Marxists were against World War I and war generally, and why they were so successful in getting people to follow them. Because, you know, we look back at the Soviet Union and you say the word Marxist and you recoil. It's a nasty word. Marxists, they're responsible for the death of tens of millions of people. It's an evil philosophy. But you have to stop and ask yourself, why were they so successful in getting people to follow them? If their message was so horrible, why did it work in the Soviet Union and in China and in parts of Asia and Eastern Europe? And the answer is, they actually had some points that made sense. So when we look back at the early 20th century, the 19th century, and we look at the conditions there, we can better understand why they were successful. And about this point about war generally, the main point they were making is that wars are fought by elites. Under monarchy, you have the king of one country fighting another country. And those kings, oftentimes in Europe, well, almost all the time, they're related. So you have a war between Germany and, say, Russia. And the wife of the Russian Tsar is German, part of the German royal family. But they're fighting. And the Marxists are going, wait a second. This is a squabble over land and resources between people who are related. This is a family squabble that's killing millions and millions of regular Germans and Russians who have nothing to do with this squabble generally. And so during World War I, when Russia was fighting Germany, the Marxists, the Bolsheviks, they went to the front lines and they talked to these Russian soldiers and they said, why are you fighting this war? For who? For what? Put your arms down. Come with us. Let's overthrow this government and end this war. And guess what? That message hit home. You have some poor guy from a rural part of Russia in the middle of nowhere being called up and sent to the front lines to fight the Germans. And you think about it from his perspective, why? What am I doing out there? And so when the Bolsheviks showed up in rabble rouse, these Russian soldiers listened. So the Marxists correctly identified that much of war simply is, again, this fight between elites over land and resources. And when we look at American history, we see that the genesis, the things that started these wars wasn't these beautiful things like democracy and freedom and liberty. What underpinned all of it was money. It was economics. So before the Revolutionary War, the English, the British, they banned our currency in the United States. And that really hurt our economy here. They were trying to keep us under control. And they were, of course, they were levying taxes. And we talk about the Tea Party. They taxed the tea and went to war. Well, that's a good motto, and of course they did tax tea. But the reason we went to war and fought off the British was because of a generally larger picture of them crushing our economy by interfering. And that's why we fought back. War of 1812. The British were fighting the French, and the United States wanted to continue trading with the European countries like France. And the English said, hey, you're helping our enemy, so if we catch your ships out in the sea trading with France, we're going to commandeer the ship and take your seamen and force them to fight for the British and force them into the British military. So we went to war. And the first thing we did when we went to war, we planned to invade Canada. Why? Because we saw Canada as all this land up there that we thought would be economically beneficial for us to take. So we start War of 1812, and we invade Canada. And that whole war ended in a stalemate, and it was pretty useless. Then we have the Civil War. It was fought over slavery. It was fought over economics. The northern industries were struggling because the South was trading with the English. And so we said, we're going to put tariffs on your southern goods so it's not as advantageous to trade with the Europeans. So we can help the northern industrialists. So the underpinning for the Civil War wasn't about slavery. It was about economics. It's always about economics. And so now we're in modern day. We have the Vietnam War. We have the Iraq War, the Afghan War. And everybody at this point realized that the Iraqi war was nonsense. There was no weapons of mass destruction. Can anybody tell me or state why we were better off for having fought that war? What did that bring to America? Nothing. Even the war in Afghanistan. We were there 20 years to fight the Taliban. 20 years later, the Taliban is still there. And where did they find Osama bin Laden? 10 years after 9/11, the entire West, all the intelligence services were searching for Osama bin Laden. Yet somehow he escaped our grasp for 10 years. And where do they find him? In Pakistan, near a Pakistani military academy. And of course, the Pakistanis knew he was there. And I wonder how long the CIA knew he was there. 10 years to find this guy? Something's fishy there. I'm not trying to be Mr. Conspiracy Theory, but when I look back at that, it's pretty odd. So we have all these wars in modern America that seemingly don't do anything for anybody who's not an elite. If you don't have stock in Halliburton or some military company. So how does our government today convince us to support these wars? Because they can't tell us the truth. They can't tell us that, oh, well, we're fighting this proxy war in Ukraine, not for freedom for the Ukrainians, but because this is a large geopolitical play by the elites in Washington, D.C. and in Western Europe to contain Russia, because we want to get rid of Putin and absorb Russia into our Western system. It's conquest, it's power and control. They can't sell you that. So what do they always do when they want to convince you to support war, even though that war does nothing for you and hurts you? This war is not hurting the elites. It's hurting the regular people in Europe. They're the ones who pay. So how do they convince you to support it? It's about freedom. It's about democracy. If you turn on the news on any day, they're going to show you sad images of a child holding a doll with tears running down their face. They go for your emotions. That's what they sell you. They sell you a horror story of innocent people being hurt. And of course, innocent people are being hurt. But again, why is the war being fought? Not to help innocent people, but it's because there are bigger things in play, geopolitics. And so the Marxists, going back to the Marxist thing, one thing, what they would do, or what they would accuse people who supported the war of, is chauvinism. And chauvinism, as used by the early 20th century Marxists, referred to somebody who was susceptible or falling into this national fervor, nationalism, support for one's country. In this context, World War I. There were several German Marxists who were attacked by the Russian Bolsheviks like Lenin and Trotsky, although Trotsky, he was a Menshevik early on. They attacked him for being supportive of Germany during World War I because that was a betrayal of Marxism. And Marxism says you don't support a nation state of war because this is not a war of the people, this is a war of the elites. And so Lenin and Trotsky attacked Karl Kautsky, a leading German Marxist, for not taking the appropriate Marxist stance against war. And he was somewhat sympathetic to Germany. And so, again, in modern times, that's the appeal. They say, you're not patriotic unless you support this Ukraine war. You have questions? Oh, you must be a Putin lover. You're a Putin puppet. Perhaps you're on Putin's payroll. And that one is always a funny one because you hear that thrown around with Tulsi Gabbard. They're on the Russians' payroll. And they always point out that Russia, their economy, is the size of Texas. Their GDP every year is like $1.8 trillion. Ours is over $20 trillion. How the heck is Russia going to buy off U.S. politicians to support Russia? It's nonsensical. When you look at it, it makes zero sense, but they keep doing it. Trump's a Russian agent. Tulsi Gabbard's a Russian agent. Tucker Carlson's a Russian agent. When they want to sell you a war, when they want to get the sheep in line to support a war, they basically accuse you of being a traitor if you don't support it. And again, they sell the image to you of liberty and freedom for the Ukrainian people against the evil Putin. So my point is not to support Marxism, but I do like to learn from the things that they said that made sense and attracted them followers. And when it comes to the issue of war, Marx made a lot of sense. Not every war, but certainly looking back through our history, now that we have more information and we're not so fooled by our government, we can see a lot of wars that weren't fought for the benefit of the common man. It was fought for the benefit of elites. And this war in Ukraine is no different. So, going forward, be anti-war. Not because you're an isolationist, but because you recognize, for the most part, these wars are not fought for our benefit. Well, that's it for now. Again, if you are new to the channel, please like and subscribe. I'll see you next time.